Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're jumping straight into, well, the deep end of personal achievement. We're not looking at, a modern motivational speaker. This is different. It's a structured philosophy. It comes from analyzing the life work, the success mechanisms of over 500 really huge American figures: Carnegie, Edison, Rockefeller, Ford, you name them. People often call this the original textbook on individual achievement.
That's exactly the frame we need for today's deep dive. And for you, the listener, looking for actionable knowledge, this is crucial. Our mission today is really to move past the catchy titles. We want to extract the precise, almost technical blueprint, the core principles that actually created massive, sustained success for these individuals. We're hunting for that intangible secret that ties it all together.
And the promises this philosophy makes are, well, they're extraordinary, aren't they? Dr. Miller Reese Hutchison, who worked closely with Thomas Edison, he didn't call it some feel-good book. He specifically called it a textbook, something that needs to be studied, digested, and meditated upon. That's pretty intense. It promises this rare ability to, quote, organize and apply the knowledge acquired. And frankly, that sounds like the missing link in a lot of education today.
It really does. It's almost like the operating manual for applied intelligence. The sources are very upfront about it. The power they describe isn't mystical exactly, but it is specialized. They hint that this secret has two parts. One part, you can't buy it, you can't just be given it, you have to acquire it through, well, effort. But the second part, and it is fascinating, they claim it's already present. It's inside every person who's truly ready for it. This philosophy is basically the method to unlock that potential that's already there.
Okay, I have to stop you there for a second, because these claims, they're inspiring, definitely, but they sound almost too grand. Andrew Carnegie, who really kicked off this whole investigation, he genuinely believed conventional schooling was, well, inadequate for making serious money. He pushed this highly specialized formula he coached young men in instead.
Oh, absolutely. Carnegie's formula, according to these sources, it worked. It worked for every single one of his proteges who really stuck to his instructions. Often turning men with very little formal education into captains of industry, he showed that the specialized knowledge you need for success, it doesn't have to be in the leader's head. The leader just needs to know how to organize it.
And that organization, the source claims, had just colossal financial value. We're talking about Charles M. Schwab, right? One of Carnegie's earliest disciples. His application of this philosophy led directly to forming the United States Steel Corporation. And the sources estimate that Schwab's single idea, just his presentation of the plan, was worth roughly $600 million in money and future opportunity. That's an insane figure for just an idea, an intangible thought. It is. It's a staggering number. And the authors use it very deliberately, I think, to show that the real value isn't in the physical stuff, the assets. It's in the power of organized, definite thought mixed with faith. The ultimate promise they make is that those who genuinely get this and use this secret find themselves literally swept onto success with but little effort, and they never again submit to failure. It suggests this kind of internal shift that makes failure psychologically, well, impossible. Okay, let's unpack that. The first principle of this incredible formula, it starts with what the sources call desire. Now, this needs clarification right away because everyone desires success on some level. How do we tell the difference between just a passive wish and this burning desire to be and to do that the philosophy demands? What makes it burning?
Yeah, that's the core distinction. It comes down to definiteness and honestly, the willingness to sacrifice for it. A wish is passive, A burning desire has clear, crystallized action steps attached. It has to be definite, almost like a consuming obsession that just eliminates any possibility of turning back. The sources actually provide a structured 6-step method for turning that vague desire for riches into something definite, something executable.
6 steps?
Yeah.
Okay, what are they? Because this is exactly the kind of structure our listeners, the learners, are looking for.
Right. And they're all focused on psychological commitment and specificity. First, fix the definite amount. You have to name the exact sum, not just a lot of money, but say $1 million or $10 million. Be precise. Second, determine the equivalent. What exactly do you intend to give in return for this money? Because there's no such thing as something for nothing, right? Third, establish a date. Fix the definite date when you intend to actually possess the money. Fourth, create the definite plan. And crucially, start immediately to put that plan into action, whether you feel ready or not. Just start. Fifth, write it out. A clear, concise statement covering those first 4 points. Get it down on paper. And sixth, read it twice daily. Read your statement aloud, morning and night. And as you read, you have to see and feel yourself already having the money.
That last step, the visualization,
Yeah.
seeing and feeling it, that seems critical. It connects the abstract goal to the subconscious mind, which I know we'll talk more about later. But let's look at a concrete example, this burning desire in action. Edwin C. Barnes and Thomas Edison.
Oh, this is the perfect illustration. Barnes wasn't just looking for any job. He had a very specific goal in mind. He wanted to work with Edison, not for him, as a business partner. That definite aim drove him to do something completely, well, irrational physically.
Yeah, he literally traveled to Orange, New Jersey by blind baggage,
Yeah.
hopping a freight train because he had no money for the fare. Zero. He shows up looking like, as Edison himself described him, an ordinary tramp. I mean, his appearance just screamed failure, didn't it?
Yeah,
But inside, that desire was shouting success.
exactly. And Edison, being this genius observer of character, he apparently ignored the shabby clothes. He looked at the expression on Barnes's face, which he said conveyed that Barnes was absolutely determined to get what he had come after. Edison realized this young guy was willing to stake his entire future on a single turn of the wheel.
Mm-hmm.
It was that determination, that single-minded focus that convinced Edison to give him a chance, albeit a menial, entry-level one.
And the persistence is just astounding. He took that menial work for 5 years.
Yeah.
5 years of labor where, the sources really emphasize this, not one ray of hope, not one promise of attainment of his desire had been held out to him. I mean, if he had just a weak desire, he would have quit in 6 months, surely.
Absolutely. He lasted because he was practicing this principle of burning all bridges behind him. He literally cut off any retreat, while everyone else probably saw him as, a janitor or some low-level clerk. In his own mind, Barnes was Edison's business partner every minute of the time. That internal identity was fixed. So when the opportunity finally came, selling the new Edison dictating machine, which others couldn't sell, Barnes grabbed it. He knew this was his moment, and he proved his worth, became Edison's partner, made millions, but the foundation, that was laid years before through that internal conviction.
Wow. Okay, so if the Barnes story shows that raw persistence driven by desire, the next case study shows how that conviction can actually overcome physical limits. I'm talking about the author's own son, Blair. It's a very personal story. Why do you think the author included this one specifically?
Well, I think it's because it's the ultimate proof that this combination, definite desire mixed with unwavering faith, can literally push reason aside. It defies logic. Blair was born without normal hearing. I mean, every rational sign pointed towards an insurmountable handicap, right? But the father decided consciously to reject that reason and replace it with this philosophy. He actively planted the definite desire in Blair's mind to hear and speak, and he mixed that desire with absolute faith that it would happen.
And the method was quite methodical, wasn't it? Repeated suggestion through bedtime stories, constantly selling the child on the idea that his affliction wasn't a liability, but somehow an asset of great value. That's a hard sell.
It is. It's like psychological warfare against conventional reality. And apparently it worked. The sources tell this story. Years later, Blair accidentally stumbles upon a hearing device that just happens to work perfectly for him. He hears clearly for the first time, and he becomes, quote, intoxicated with the joy of his changed world. And that immediate, intense emotional flood leads to an impulse, a thought, a definite desire to dedicate his life to helping other deafened people.
So wait, not only did the desire and persistence lead to the physical reality of him hearing, but his imagination immediately flipped that long-standing physical handicap into a valuable career asset. Is that right?
Precisely. That's the alchemy. He then did intensive research, created a 2-year marketing plan for this hearing device, and boom, he gets hired instantly into a high-level executive role, high starting salary. He literally transformed his adversity into his definite chief aim, which brought him financial success and massive service to thousands. It's the ultimate example of turning lead into gold, psychologically speaking.
Okay, the success of Blair's story brings us right to that second pillar, faith. The sources are really clear here. Faith isn't just some spiritual gift you either have or you don't. It's described as a state of mind that can be induced through something called autosuggestion or self-suggestion.
Yes, exactly. And this is where the philosophy starts to feel a bit like a science of the mind. The subconscious mind, which the sources see as the source of our real power, it only acts on thoughts that are thoroughly mixed with emotion or feeling. In other words, belief. Plain, unemotional words, they don't register, they bounce off.
So the emotional intensity behind the desire, that's the critical fuel. The philosophy uses this really interesting, though kind of dark analogy to explain how this works. The making of a criminal.
Yeah, it's startlingly direct, isn't it? The idea is a person might initially hate crime, find it abhorrent, but then maybe through circumstances they start associating with people who commit crimes. Gradually they get used to the idea, they endure it, and then finally they embrace it. They become influenced by it. They end up taking on the nature of the influences that dominate their environment. It happens automatically. So the principle is, in the same way, you can develop faith by voluntarily feeding your subconscious mind the positive influences of success, of definite purpose, mixed with that strong emotion.
Right. So we can actively program our own belief system. That's a powerful idea. But let's address the elephant in the room here for a second. The sources bring in this concept that honestly sounds less like a business philosophy and maybe more like New Age mysticism, the ether and thought vibration. How do we as pragmatic learners process this idea that our brains are somehow literally magnetized by the cosmos?
That's a really fair question, and it's necessary to tackle it. The sources view the brain not just as an organ, they see it as a broadcasting and receiving station for thought. They propose that the entire universe, this ether the Earth floats in, it's all energy, pure energy. And this universal power adapts itself to the nature of the thoughts we consistently hold in our minds.
Okay, so our brains become magnetized effectively by our dominant thoughts. And this magnetic energy then attracts similar harmonious vibrations from the ether, sort of lining up opportunities with our focus.
That's the idea, exactly. And here's the most profound warning they give. This power doesn't discriminate. It's neutral. If you constantly dwell on thoughts of poverty, doubt, failure, and you charge those thoughts with fear, this mechanism will translate those destructive thoughts into their physical equivalent, just as quickly and surely as it will translate thoughts of riches and success charged with faith. We have to grasp that this broadcasting ability is neutral. We are the ones choosing the frequency, the filter.
Wow. Okay, that makes the practical steps for inducing faith absolutely non-negotiable then. They have to be followed precisely. We should probably revisit those specific instructions for magnetizing the mind, as they put it.
Yes, the process is described as quite mechanical, almost ritualistic. You have to take that written statement of your major purpose, your definite chief aim we talked about earlier, commit it to memory, and then repeat it aloud daily, morning and night. The sources really stress the need for audible words, because that creates the physical vibration they believe is necessary to reach and imprint upon the subconscious mind.
Right, the audible part. And what about the visualization piece? How specific do we need to get with that?
Very specific. Extremely. You need to concentrate, eyes closed, and visualize not just some abstract goal, but the actual physical appearance of the money or the result you want. You have to see yourself already in possession of it, mentally demanding and expecting your subconscious mind to hand over the practical plans to get it. This act of mental ownership, believing it's already yours, is apparently vital.
And those practical plans, the sources suggest they don't always come through deliberate, hard, logical work, do they? Sometimes it's more like a flash of insight.
Yes, exactly. Often it comes via what they call the sixth sense, a sudden, unbidden inspiration. Or they even call it a direct telegram from infinite intelligence, like a download. And the instruction is clear. Treat that inspiration with immense respect. Act on it immediately. Don't second guess it, because this is the subconscious delivering the answer to the consistent emotional demands you've been making on it.
Okay, so we're moving from the internal world, desire and faith, to the external application, knowledge. And here the sources deliver a pretty strong warning about, well, the limits of just general knowledge.
It's a really critical distinction they make. Knowledge itself is only potential power. It's not power on its own. General knowledge, the kind held in great quantity by, say, many university professors knowing a little bit about a lot of things, is described as having, quote, little use for accumulating money, unless it's organized and intelligently directed toward a definite economic goal. The sources argue that the traditional education system often fails right here by teaching facts without teaching how to organize and apply them.
So the person building the fortune doesn't actually need to possess all the facts themselves, which is perfectly illustrated by that famous story about Henry Ford during his libel suit, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, the classic example. Ford was being unfairly called an ignorant pacifist by a newspaper.
Yeah.
So during the trial, the opposing lawyers tried to prove his ignorance by asking him these really trivial general knowledge questions. Things like, who was Benedict Arnold? Or when did the 1776 rebellion happen? Stuff you learn in school but might forget.
And Ford, after getting annoyed, basically shut them down with the ultimate comeback. He said something like, if he really needed the answer to any foolish question like that, he had a row of electric push buttons on my desk. And he could just push a button and summon people who did know the answer.
That's the pivotal insight right there. Building great fortunes requires highly organized, intelligently directed, specialized knowledge. But the person building the fortune, the leader, only needs to know how to acquire and command that knowledge through their network, through others. They don't need to have it all stored in their own head.
And coordinating that knowledge, that effort, requires getting others involved. Which brings us to the mastermind principle. For listeners who might not be familiar, what exactly is the mastermind concept?
The mastermind is defined as the coordination of knowledge and effort between two or more people working together in a spirit of perfect harmony towards a definite purpose. Andrew Carnegie famously attributed his entire massive success to the power he built through his mastermind group, which was apparently about 50 different men specialists in steel, finance, logistics, whose combined knowledge and effort he directed towards steel production.
And to make this system actually work for someone trying to apply it today, the sources lay out 4 very specific non-negotiable steps for forming a mastermind alliance.
Yes, and they're very clear. Neglect even one of these and the whole thing falls apart. It guarantees failure. 1. Choose your allies carefully. Ally yourself with the specific people whose knowledge, education, and influence you need to carry out your plan. 2. Define compensation. Decide clearly what advantages or benefits you offer the members of your group for their cooperation. It has to be mutually beneficial. No one works for free indefinitely. 3. Establish frequency. Meet regularly, at least twice a week, they suggest, or even more often, until your plans are absolutely perfected and ready to go. And 4. Maintain harmony. This is stressed as the absolute most critical part. You must maintain perfect harmony among all members. Any discord, jealousy, friction, it acts like sand in the gears. It will sabotage the entire principle. Harmony is essential.
And the ultimate example of this mastermind power in action is, again, that story of Charles Schwab and the creation of U.S. Steel. It just perfectly shows the power of a single, well-communicated idea delivered through organized effort.
It really does. It happened at that famous University Club dinner, December 12, 1900. J.P. Morgan was there, all the biggest financial titans of the era. Schwab, who was much younger, was asked to speak. And he didn't talk about assets or current profits or balance sheets. He gave this 90-minute speech focused entirely on an idea.
Right. It was this clear-cut vision for the aggrandizement of steel, as they put it. He laid out this whole strategy for industrial efficiency, specialization, scrapping old mills, going after foreign markets aggressively. It was all about future strategy, not just reporting on what they currently had.
Exactly. It was an intangible concept and idea, but it was mixed with Schwab's absolute faith in its execution. He believed it utterly. Morgan was reportedly just swept off his feet. He was completely captivated. The presentation was so powerful that when Schwab then negotiated the sale of Carnegie Steel to Morgan's group, he successfully got a price around $400 million, which already included the projected increase in value based on his plan working.
And Morgan himself apparently admitted later, if you had asked for $100 million, you'd have gotten it. Just incredible.
It really underscores the source's main point. Schwab's intangible ingredients, his organized idea, his faith, his persistence, delivered through that mastermind context, effectively increased the appraised value of the combined properties by an estimated $600 million. That profit was earned because U.S. Steel then proceeded to prosper exactly as Schwab had predicted. The mastermind principle, fueled by these intangible thoughts, was the real asset being valued and traded.
That mastermind relies on relentless effort, which brings us neatly to the 5th element, persistence. The sources define this as the sustained effort necessary to induce faith. They suggest it's the one quality that simply cannot be replaced by anything else.
Yeah, persistence is like the ultimate litmus test. The sources have this interesting idea that the hidden guide, or whatever internal force controls our destiny, it tests people through setbacks and discouraging experiences. Those who quit at the first sign of real trouble, they get sifted out. But those who just keep pushing, keep trying, they inevitably arrive. Persistence wins.
We see this play out all the time, especially in creative fields, where rejection is just part of the game. Like the case of Fannie Hurst, the writer. She was determined to make a living writing, but she got 36 rejection slips from the Saturday Evening Post alone before they finally bought her first story. I mean, most people would stop after 5, maybe 10 rejections, right?
Absolutely. Or think about Kate Smith, the singer. She apparently sang for free, without money and without price, literally anywhere she could find a microphone. She just forced Broadway producers, through sheer volume and sustained presence, to finally pay attention. She persisted until they were basically tired of ignoring her, and finally asked her to name her price. And she achieved an income far beyond what she'd even dreamed of. The point is, persistence is a state of mind. If you make up your mind to be persistent, you will eventually break through.
And this quality, persistence, it's essential for the kind of new leadership the sources describe. They draw this really crucial line between old styles of leadership and the model needed for modern, sustainable success.
Right. Historically, you saw leadership by force. Think Napoleon, Kaiser Wilhelm, maybe. That kind of leadership, based on coercion, it's temporary. It doesn't last. The only enduring kind, they argue, is leadership by consent. It has to be founded on mutual cooperation and a fair, equitable division of the profits or benefits. It establishes more of a partnership model. The employer, the employee, and even the public, everyone benefits somehow.
And the sources list 11 specific factors that define this successful modern leader. Maybe we should zero in on a few of the most essential or maybe surprising qualities that challenge common ideas about leadership.
Sure. A successful leader absolutely must demonstrate a keen sense of justice. Fairness is key. Also, definiteness of decision and definiteness of plans. No waffling. Leaders decide and plan clearly. Conversely, one of the major causes of leadership failure listed is, interestingly, lack of imagination. A leader has to be able to see and plan beyond the current reality. Otherwise, they're just managing the status quo, which is mediocrity. And crucially, they must be willing to assume full responsibility, not just for their own mistakes, but for their subordinates' mistakes, too. No passing the buck.
This whole cooperative approach also needs a new way to measure personal services, the QQS formula. For you, the listener, may be looking to improve your own career position. What does QQS stand for, and why is that spirit factor so important?
QQS stands for quality, quantity, and the proper spirit of cooperation. Quality means doing your work well, efficiently. Quantity is about the volume of service you render, the output. But spirit, that S, that's the attitude, how you deliver the work. Andrew Carnegie apparently placed immense value on harmony and cooperation. He allowed many of his associates to become incredibly wealthy, partly because they rendered their services with the right spirit. A cheerful, cooperative attitude that made them indispensable. They were willing to go the extra mile without complaining, fitting into that harmonious mastermind.
And this focus on organized preparation and spirit is exactly why the sources challenge that old saying about starting at the bottom and working your way up. They argue that tradition often just breeds mediocrity, it kills ambition, and it leaves people stuck in a rut where opportunity just can't find them.
Exactly. They argue the smarter move is to aim to start near the top. How? By preparing a plan so brilliant, so definite, so valuable that the potential employer basically has to hire you at a higher level. They give this really remarkable example. The woman who created what they call the personal service sales plan for her son.
Right. Instead of just sending a basic resume, she created this detailed, professional, 50-page dramatized brief. What was actually in that document that made it so effective?
Well, it was a full presentation of her son's skills, experience, education, yes. But the key was the foresight. It included a detailed word picture of the exact plan he would implement in the position he was applying for. It even included specific suggestions for the prospective employer on how they could improve their operations, maybe even beat their competitors. It showed initiative and strategic thinking.
Wow, so to produce that, she must have done weeks of library research, analyzing the company, its competitors, the market.
Precisely. It was deep, specialized preparation. And that detailed, definite plan secured her son a junior executive role at the salary he wanted on the very first interview. The sources estimate this single plan clipped off no less than 10 years of time he would have required to get to where he began had he started at the bottom and worked his way up. It just shows the incredible power of selling definite plans and ideas instead of just selling your time and basic labor.
And we see that same refusal to just accept mediocrity in the story Dan Halpin. He started in a commission sales job he really disliked. But he didn't just quit or complain. He refused to compromise with life, as the book says.
Right. He was apparently inspired by the football coach New Rockney's intense desire to excel. Halpin used that disliked job not as a dead end, but as a launch pad. He applied proper planning and persistence within that role. He aimed for a much higher executive position, not just a small step up. And by focusing his organized effort, he became a vice president in just 6 months. The takeaway is really potent. You either rise or you stay at the bottom because of conditions that you can control, but only if you actually choose to control them.
That idea of control brings us to maybe the ultimate level of self-mastery discussed in these sources. Control over our thoughts. Nature, they say, has given us absolute control over only one thing, our thoughts, what goes on in our own mind. And if we fail to control our thoughts, we become victims of these 6 basic fears, these ghosts that translate fear impulses into their negative physical equivalent.
Yes, the sources categorize these fears, but they really focus most energy on what they call the most destructive ghost, the fear of poverty. They describe this state of mind as something that paralyzes reason, destroys imagination, kills self-reliance, undermines enthusiasm. It's powerful enough, they claim, to destroy one's chances of achievement in any undertaking. Just the fear itself.
The sources even reference the writer Westbrook Pegler, who observed how the lack of money can literally destroy a person's spirit, leading to that visible droop in someone's shoulders, that sense of inferiority, even in people who otherwise have great character or ability. Poverty is such a painful experience that the fear of it becomes incredibly potent and pervasive in society.
Then there's the really insidious fear of criticism. This one is almost universal, isn't it? We see its symptoms in just our daily habits. The sources famously use the example of why men started going bald. They suggest it was wearing tight hats, not because it was necessary, but because everyone is doing it. Fearing the criticism of looking different, appearing hatless, or wearing something unfashionable, manufacturers capitalize on this fear all the time by constantly changing fashions in cars, clothes, everything.
And tragically, this fear often gets implanted really young, causing just irreparable damage. The sources tell that sad anecdote about the author's boyhood friend whose mother constantly told him he'd land in the penitentiary before you were 20. He internalized that constant criticism, it destroyed his ambition, and sure enough, he was sent to a reformatory at 17.
Criticism, especially from people we trust, can just poison the well of definite purpose. It's incredibly damaging. And just to equip you, the listener, for that self-analysis, we should probably quickly list the symptoms of the other 4 key fears they identify. The fear of ill health. This shows up as constantly thinking about sickness, self-diagnosing, hypochondria, using illness as an excuse. The fear of loss of love. This often leads to excessive jealousy, suspicion, fault-finding in relationships, even gambling sometimes. The fear of old age. This can manifest as apologizing for your age, slowing down initiative prematurely, developing an inferiority complex about aging. And finally, the fear of death. This often shows up less as fear of dying itself and more as worry over poverty after death or what will happen to family rather than focusing on living fully now.
Wow, it sounds absolutely exhausting just being governed by those 6 ghosts all the time. But the sources promise there's an immediate antidote, specifically for worry. Worry, they define it very precisely. It's a state of mind based upon sustained fear, and it is caused solely by one thing: indecision.
This is a really remarkable psychological insight, isn't it? Indecision. That's what allows the mind to just spin endlessly, exploring all the infinite possibilities of negative outcomes. Nothing is settled. When you're undecided, your mind is wide open, vulnerable to every fear vibration floating around. Therefore, the antidote to worry is simple yet profound. Prompt and firm decision. Making a choice shuts the door.
The power of just making a decision is apparently so strong that the sources use that incredibly profound example of the man condemned to be electrocuted. Just 2 hours before his execution, he was the calmest person in the whole prison block, eating a hearty dinner. And when asked why he was so serene, he basically explained, "I've felt fine ever since I knew for certain I had to die. I made up my mind then to accept my fate in good spirit."
Right. The decision, even though it was acceptance of death, it brought him resignation and calmness because it confined the problem. The uncertainty was gone. The fear evaporated because the question mark was removed. He knew what was happening. And we can use that same profound power in our own lives to stop accepting undesired circumstances. Whip the fear of poverty by deciding you will get along without worry. Find a way. Whip the fear of criticism by deciding not to care what others think or say. Eliminate the fear of old age by deciding to accept it as a blessing carrying wisdom. Decision is like the hammer that shatters the power of these ghosts of fear.
So this entire philosophy spanning desire, faith, persistence, organized knowledge, overcoming fear, it all loops back to that central, most powerful idea. You are the master of your destiny because you have absolute control over your thoughts, full stop. You decide whether you get swept onto success or dragged down by negative influences, both internal and external.
Exactly. We saw how controlling the mind was the common thread in all those successful people they studied. People with negative minds told Thomas Edison he couldn't build a machine to record sound. He just refused to accept that thought. People with negative minds told F.W. Woolworth his 5 and 10-cent store idea was ridiculous, foolish. He ignored them completely. George Washington was apparently constantly undermined by doubters and critics during the Revolution. He just trusted his own inner vision. They all controlled their mental focus.
And mind control isn't something you're born with, is it? It's the result of self-discipline and habit. keeping your mind perpetually busy with a definite purpose, backed by a definite plan. If you can't discipline yourself enough to keep your mind focused on your chief aim, the sources argue, you won't be able to control much else in your life either.
And that leads us right to the final summation, doesn't it? The master key that's embedded in all this. The ultimate privilege given to us as humans is this capacity to create within our own mind a burning desire for a definite form of riches or achievement or service, whatever it is. The price for using this key is persistence and application of these principles. The price for not using it, well, that's guaranteed failure and remaining susceptible to those 6 ghosts of fear.
So now, for you, the listener, seeking to apply this knowledge right away, the final challenge really comes down to rigorous self-inventory. Honest self-assessment. The sources recommend asking yourself this tough question at the end of every single year. If I had been the purchaser of my own services for the past year, would I be satisfied with my purchase?
Oof. Yeah, that requires a really honest, definite self-analysis based on that QQS formula we discussed. The quality, the quantity, and crucially, the spirit of the service you rendered. You're now armed with the structure, those 6 steps of desire, the methods of autosuggestion and faith building, the mastermind requirement for harmony, and that Kim insight that indecision fuels worry.
As the immortal Emerson observed, if we are related, we shall meet. And through this deep dive today to the very philosophy that apparently made Titans, perhaps we have met on some level. Now, the challenge is simple, really. Stop the endless analysis. Maybe stop the reading for a bit. And go make a prompt and definite decision about what you truly desire and how you'll get it.